Hello and welcome to the Delirium engine. I'm Bryant, aka Mekhalikhar, hot off his fresh doxing from last episode. Thanks, you, Shooty. Who is not with us today, coincidentally.
I think I left him in the trunk.
As I've said in previous episodes, the Delirium engine right now is an exploration of a series of rules that I wrote in university, and a conversation. These last roughly an hour. And we are exploring each of these rules in turn. We've already explored the plot is unimportant. We explored how setting was basically brooked much tampering, and now we will plod on to the next topic. But before we go into that, I'm going to introduce who's my co-hosts today. Back from his long missed absence is Swampy.
Hello.
And newly with us today is Mr. Dagwood himself.
Hello.
And we will be discussing our rule number 3, which, as I mentioned last week, is system implies setting. Choose wisely. Now, this rule is a bit different from the last two, in that the other two are sort of red light rules, in that if you sort of cross over the boundaries of what these rules are telling you, your game has a much greater chance of being bad. Whereas this one is more like a yellow light, in that, yes, if you ignore the rule in its entirety, your game does become worse, but your system is not as important as the overall story and the characters involved in the game. So, listening to this rule is more of a guideline and less of a rule itself, I would say. But with that said, hopefully the three of us will be able to entertain and hammer out some interesting points. I guess I'll start with what I exactly mean by this rule, and as I've put these papers in front of you so that we don't interrupt each other, this is specifically for me, as I say many times. The clickety-clacking that you hear is our two dogs that seem to be down here today. So our good sound, today's good sound background noise is going to be the clicky clacking of dog claws. So one day we will actually have an episode where there's good sound, where we won't have family dinners going on upstairs or dogs or Shooty.
We're in a basement.
We're in a basement. My beautifully crafted sound studio. All right. So, like I was saying, system implies setting, choose wisely. Now, what this rule meant when it was written was that you have a variety of systems and or modules that have been attached to systems. And these systems have certain implications with the overall playing of the game, or even the narrative itself. Almost everything, because the game is played using this set of rules, almost everything is governed by this set of rules. So, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, it's pretty explicit that a normal person can't jump, 100 feet into the air. So your narrative is usually not going to have people jumping 100 feet into the air. Like this is just not going to happen. The system is set up that it's not going to do that. And you could easily add modules to it, say that human normal jump speed is changed to 100 feet in the air, yada yada yada, but that's you changing the system. With that said though, the rule, the guideline, and why it's here, is it's meant to sort of warn GMs that you, having chosen your system, have to bear the consequences of the system you've chosen. And with that said, I think I will ask one of my two co-hosts if they have any opinions on this rule before we go into examples, because I have a feeling much of this program is going to be examples, because I don't think there's going to be much to disagree with.
I think with the way you've described it, I think it's rather I would agree, because I don't really see when it comes to say Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowrun, and other games you play, it's they are specifically meant for those settings, or at least things that are broad within those, the spectrum. Like Shadowrun is post-apocalyptic, cyberpunk. D&D is obviously more or less fantasy based, so there isn't really elements that like fully cater to. The systems aren't really broad enough, in my opinion, to cater to all of them. Like I've seen people play use the Dungeons and Dragons core books and modules and things like that to play somewhat of futuristic campaigns and whatnot, but I never really found them to be that. They didn't really cater to anything that they weren't initially meant for.
Do you have any experience with universal systems like Gurps or
I played
Palladium? I would call universal as well.
I played big
Bessem.
Yeah, I played Bessem, and I think I hated every minute of it.
Yeah, that system's really bad.
Sorry,
guy who made Bessem, but your system sucks.
Well, it's. I just found it to be. I found it difficult to learn. Then again, too, like I was fairly young. I didn't really. I don't know. I didn't like obviously like to that catered to things that were more anime based and things like that. But like I like the idea of like broad universal settings, but I think that there has to be a lot of work done in terms of setting a lot of ground rules that cater to the setting you want to do. There's going to be, like as you mentioned, like a lot of modules and whatnot that would do so.
Mr. Dagwood?
I actually feel quite similarly to that, but I think it's a matter of a layer of abstraction, because the system itself doesn't really preclude anything. I mean, there's nothing in the strict sense that says you couldn't take D&D and make it a Starship campaign. But you would have to change things like the skills and so on, but the general mechanics could remain the same. I don't think it would lend itself particularly well in that case, but it is possible. Thing is that it's not just like a direct effect. You pick a system, it limits your setting. And so if you pick a system, the way it plays out makes some challenges more fun. Mm-hmm. And based on that is what's going to determine whether or not it lends itself to particular stories. And those stories rely heavily on setting. And so when you have something like Bessem D20, I actually thought was quite a lot of fun for superhero campaigns. It's actually really great for that. In fantasy, it was garbage. It honestly did not play well in that regard. And it was simply because the way power was generated. It said, you got a guy who can jump, 100 feet. I guess that's relatively equal to a guy who can throw lasers from his hands at people. But again, it all depends on what your story and setting is, whether or not those abilities are particularly more or less useful. Something like Gurps, I find actually still follows this in the sense that it is universal. It does work for a wide variety of settings, but I don't think it actually does in the most direct sense, because it relies heavily on social mechanics. The way the rules are, they're very straightforward, but any skill is essentially equal to another skill. It's not necessarily free. It can also be limiting in how you want certain challenges to be.
Can't stop petting the dogs. Sorry.
Yes, good puppies. It depends on how you want certain challenges to play out. And so something like Gurps, I find it works better for like heavy social, political campaigns, for example, those kind of adventures. But if you're talking about, mystery, that's a great kind of genre that fits with it. But if you want things that are very tactical, it may not be your best bet. And again, a lot of those stories, those settings, that's entirely what it depends on. I mean, war is, commonplace in D&D, in that universe, right? That setting. But the rules are terrible for it.
Yeah. D&D has pretty much no rules regarding greater conflicts, like larger conflicts. You could do some scaling thing, like I did in Cast, where you can scale an army in the same way. Like you write up an army like you would write a character, and you just name it an army, and then you refer to its individual pieces as something larger than what a normal character would have. So like its attack would just be like its military strength or something like that. So you have two characters which are representing armies fighting, so that they can do this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But like, once again, you're getting into you're doing something that's outside the system of Dungeons and Dragons. Like Cast did it because it built a module specifically for that, loosely. But
nice plug. Nice plug.
It's a universal system I know the best because I built it.
It's true.
What can I say? But I'm sure like I've never seen a really good system that does army battles really well. I don't think, because it's too chaotic, right? Like how do you put numbers to a page with army battles? Like I don't know. I think Exalted might have something, because it kind of deals with that, but it kind of doesn't at the same time, because you can literally kill an army of 10 million in one turn. Like so like maybe they just don't give a shit. I don't.
Hey, that's great in Warhammer.
Yeah. Well, okay. Obviously, tabletop like miniature games deal with it a lot better. But like, holy man, are we really gonna play a tabletop miniature game every time we want to have a war? I guess that could be fun. But of course, my phone's gonna ring during podcasting time. That's good. It's not anybody important either. That's the best part. It's gonna be either like the bank trying to sell me things, or Jordan.
I was gonna say we turn them on and pop them in.
Yeah, pop them in, bring them in, see if the bank wants to have a talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Maybe it's that like doxing you've been waiting for.
Oh, that hot doxing. So okay, so I guess what we're saying here, already, just what we've touched on is that in general, the system you choose is going to be. Some systems like have strengths and weaknesses based on what they're meant for. Like D&D is obviously meant for D&D because that's what everybody plays, right? But if you try to take D&D and use it somewhere else, it starts to fall apart. And vice versa. Like say Shadowrun, you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, but you're using Shadowrun. You know the D&D, like all the Shadowrun's themes will start bleeding into your D&D game, and things like that. And if you're using these universal systems. You either have to heavily modify them, like in terms of Besom or whatever. Like you have to basically just cut so much stuff to get where you want. Like if you wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons but using the Besom system to turn it into a D&D game that feels like D&D, I don't even know. I don't even know how you do that. Like it's not possible. So, but like we can all agree on that. Basically, your systems are different and they feel different.
For sure, like that's.
So I guess this is where the choose wisely part comes in, because I'm going to ask my next question, because everyone's chosen D&D. You all taken D&D. You didn't think about it. You're like, D&D's a good game. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Like thinking about things like beholders, dragons, and things like that too. Like thinking about where the system implies setting, and I don't know if. And sorry if I feel like I'm jumping ahead on this. It's just kind of a thought that came in my head, but. There are monsters, but not only monster lore, monsters, and implements the monsters use are setting specific, right? Which is why, like, core books plus other things tend to have a lot of things that like intertwine. They cater to one another. So I couldn't really see the unless you wanted to take, say, like the nature of a beholder, its history, and completely change it for your own. Personal game or whatever. Like I don't really see how it would be. I don't really see how it would work. I would also really, as almost like I guess you could say like a bit of a purist. I would almost be slightly offended, like if I was playing, say, playing a game in say future space or whatever, and then all of a sudden I run into like I'm on a forbidden planet meeting inhabitants, and then I run into things like goblins or whatever, right? I'd be a little like, but then again too, that's my own personal preference, that Puritan in me.
Yeah, you can just call them boglars.
Yeah, exactly.
And say that they're blue and they've got little antennas and suddenly they work.
Yeah, but still
the stats are the same.
Exactly, but like the thing is though, is like you have certain monsters though that are setting specific. They're They cater to these books for a reason, right? So
sure, okay, yeah. So as I was saying before the point was put in, and yeah, I would agree with that, and I think we're going to touch on that later because that's going to be a later question. Like it's going to be part of it. So a little bit you did jump the gun, but that's fine. It's foreshadowing. So let's assume that we've all picked our setting. Like you didn't think about it too much because we're going to look into the choose wisely thing. You didn't think about it too much. You're like, let's play Dungeons and Dragons. We're playing Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to play 5th. I like 5th. It's new. Let's play 5th. Well, 5th is great. And so you choose 5th. You're like, guys, let's play 5th. And all your players, they make 5th characters. And there's one player He's a little bit better at reading the books than everybody else, maybe including the GM. And he makes a character you don't like using the rules that you said were available. Now, my question to you is that what do you do in this situation? What do we do? We've got the rules lawyer. Or, yeah, there's another thing.
Okay.
You're running your game. You're running your Dungeons & Dragons game, and you make a ruling as the GM, right? But it goes against the rules of the Dungeons & Dragons game, and your rules lawyer goes, hem, you fucked up. You screwed up. Swear words. You screwed up. This is how it actually goes. What takes precedence?
I'd have to say that's definitely one of those gray area situation calls. You got to turn and say, well, for example, are you trying to mimic the effects of a particular spell or something like that? Then what's in the book matters, and if you honestly made a mistake, then by all means. If, however, it was something that you're just unaware of, and it wasn't that the rules are giving the following the intention that you set out for, then at that point, I would say just go with it. Tell the person that you've made this call, but not in the way of it's because I said so. But I would go back in it and I would find a rationalization in the story to justify why it was different that time. That's the way I would go about it.
So your approach would be retconning, basically.
Well, behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you'll find a reason why this is the way. Like, you've retconned something, you're just, no, I was right because story said so.
Yeah, if that was a particular case.
Okay, yeah. And then in the future, you'll just keep an eye on that rule?
Yeah, and that's the thing. If I was honestly mistaken, I was like, oh, geez, I thought for sure that this feat gave you, +5 to attack or something like that. Yeah, then by all means.
Yeah.
Then by all means, correct me, let me know. If it's something that nobody knows the rule on, you just got to make something, plug it there, and say you'll address it later. But honestly, I find a little respect goes a long way with that. Being just honest, let's move the game forward. It helps.
Swampy, what do you think? Character, rules lawyering in your game.
I think, me personally, what I like to do is I take rules lawyering. I don't mind it to a certain degree, but if I were to, say, eliminate or change a rule, I'd want to do that prior to even starting the campaign or the game or whatever, right?
Yeah, but in this scenario, you've come up with a situation that your call on what system you've used is now in conflict with the ruling that you as a GM gave. I'm not going to go into a specific because I can't think of one off the top of my head. But these things happen. We all know what happens. That's why rules lawyers are infamous for disrupting a game.
Yeah, for sure. And I would think to myself, I'd be like, okay, well, is this one of those scenarios where the rules lawyer is trying to just debate to get what he or she wants? Which is usually,
let's assume yes.
Which is usually the case, yes. And you know what? I would say, okay, well, let's think about the rationale behind it, right? Because obviously we're taking situations, we're trying to fantasize and put numbers behind them, right? So I'd sit there and it is very situation dependent. Dependent on the rule. There are some things where, I as a GM would say, yes, but you're doing this. You're doing A, and the laws of, say, physics apply or whatever, and it's very situational. But I think that like anything, it's almost up for discussion on why. If they can provide a good argument, honestly, I'd probably let them have it.
So the argument is it's in the book.
It's in the book. Then I would. Well,
page 75, paragraph 4.
Regardless of rule, the thing is though, is that just because there's a rule for it doesn't necessarily mean the rule makes really any sense.
Yeah, but that's not the point. You've chosen the system, and he's saying that your ruling is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Page 79, paragraph 4 states that you're dead wrong. I'm dead right. Give me my treasure.
I would argue the laws of nature at that point, or the laws of the thing that we're trying to do, would. More or less subvert whatever page or whatever.
So you basically would say that your narrative takes precedence over the setting.
I wouldn't necessarily say my narrative. I would say the sense of things, because the idea of someone attempting to say, for example, me as a GM attempting to create, use a monster, use a trap or something, and then there's a debate between a rule. I would I would then like argue my sense of like this is what the trap does. This is what the rule says. This is what the trap does. So this is an exception to the rule because of the nature of the thing.
Okay, so I guess what I've heard and what I've already established, I kind of established, but I think you guys are in agreement, is that the conflicts between players and GMs with regard to the rules versus like, you know, your ruling or your sense of physical reality versus their discussion of the rules, these are disruptive to the game, right? Mm-hmm. So the rule seems to be discussing this idea, right? Like this notion that like if you are not familiar enough with your system, that you are going to come into conflict with your players over the system. Like, we're not going to count the rules lawyer who's always wrong, and those really exist. They're fun. And they're hilarious, where they'll tell you that this is wrong and you look it up and you just point to them, the text, and say learn to read. But we're not going to talk about them because disruptive players are disruptive. That's not what we're talking about is situations where, because these systems are very complex, GMs don't have a grasp on every bloody page and every bloody paragraph, but PCs do have a grasp on the parts that pertain to their characters. They usually have a very good grasp on it because they're the ones who are trying to abuse it all to heck. Yes. Unless they're trash at it, at abusing things, and then you can just, like I said, learn to read. But avoiding these kinds of, like, headbutts are probably... is probably is a good thing. Like, when you choose a system, you basically want to make sure that your system conforms to both the physical reality that you have for your game, and then also your sense of what your game wants to feel like. So, like, let me just sort of flip it around a bit, right? You know, Swampy, like, this is a trash example, but it's an example nonetheless. Let's say that you want to play a standard D&D style game, but for some reason you just love the Exalted storyteller system, and you're like, all you guys, you make solar exalts. Just use those rules, but we'll treat it as if you're playing regular D&D characters. Instead of solar, instead of like Dawncast, you're a fighter. Instead of Nightcast, you're a rogue. Whatever, right? And then every time the players try to do something that a solar exalt could do, but a D&D character doesn't do, you know, you say, no, my physical reality. Like, you know, physical reality says you can't do that, you know.
Yeah.
In a situation, I guess, like that, like, would Exalted, like, these seem like such stupid examples, right? Because we're trying to, like, tease out why picking a bad system is a stupid idea, which is self-evident, but it isn't. Because
it's experience, right?
Let's tease out these trash examples, and then we'll go into more acute examples later on. Because the acute examples are probably more interesting, but I'd like to establish a very firm, like, yes, don't pick a dumb setting or dumb system for your setting, right? If you want, like, Exalted, let's say, has a feel to it. Like, if anybody's played, have ever you played Exalted?
No.
Okay, Exalted is like, have you ever seen? Let me think of what it... You know what? Okay, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon plus Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay? Like, every single character is the most powerful character in both those movies combined. Like, your weakest character is Aang, the Wushu god with that magic sword. Okay? All of them.
That sounds like my personal hell.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You're not really into that, I guess. But all the villains that you fight are like that, too. Like, basically, you know, people sunder worlds, essentially. Like, they're not actually sundering worlds, but the world itself is a place where there are special people, and those people are exalts. And there are people below exalts, and they are so far below exalts that they do not compare. You know, 100 million peasants will not defeat a solar exalt. Ever. He can pick up a rock, and he's like, one at a time or all at once, it doesn't matter to me. You're all dead. And the 100 million peasants will be like, we are 100 million. And he's like, that's very interesting. I will throw one rock, and you will all die. Like, that's a very different feel to Dungeons & Dragons, where 100 million peasants attacks the 20th level fighter. The 20th level fighter goes, Oh, I hope they don't roll crits. I hope they don't roll crits. Anyway, so I think we can establish that's the case. Maybe I went on a bit of a rant. This episode's a little bit off the rails, but so be it. But more subtly speaking, I guess, do you think that players are, even if it benefits them, are enriched by GMs going outside the system for their own purposes? So this is trying to get into a more subtle thing, and I'm trying to get a grasp on it. Let's say the GM tries to use a monster, because you mentioned monsters before, and we'll go into that. So the GM tries to use a monster, but the GM is not very well versed in what the monster is, and he attempts to use it and uses it poorly. Okay, he just doesn't understand the system, and he doesn't understand the apparatus that was set up for that monster. And so he uses it, and he uses it poorly. The PCs, they have a pretty good time of it, and they defeat the monster.
Yeah, who doesn't like winning?
Who doesn't like winning?
Yeah.
Do you feel that you have enriched your game by using the monster incorrectly and allowing them to win? Or would your game be enriched that if you use the monster correctly, let's assume, because my train of thought's kind of forming here, if you used that monster correctly, it would have been a TPK. Do you feel that the game would have been enriched by the monster being used correctly as per the setting and the implications that the setting is giving you with the stats the monster that you are provided with? Or by giving the PCs a freebie win that they can brag to their friends about, saying, yeah, I killed the Mind Flayer. Level 5, no problem.
See, I like to... Here's my thing.
Which one enriches the game more?
I think the TPK, honestly, because and some people would disagree with that, and that's fine. I just think that if you're going to have something, you should research it and do it properly, because if you don't, then if you like in terms of monsters, the idea of a Mind Flayer, it's something so powerful, methodical, and alien that it has to be treated as such. If you were to do something like and not pilot it properly, sometimes it stains the name of the Mind Flayer, and the players are just like, yeah, I beat like 6 of those once. And
then next time,
right? Then it's completely different. So the idea that a Mind Flayer can be so easily beaten, to me is ridiculous. Like when I'm a player, I like the idea of when someone puts a monster out and it is hyped up to be this this creature of eldritch horror. It's methodical. It usurps civilizations. I want to feel that. I don't want to walk into a bar, run into it, and kick its ass. Like, it makes no sense to me. That's if anything, that's honestly one of my big pet peeves. I ran into many games as a player where they'll throw in something that has no reason for being there, and it's just essentially standing there. It doesn't help with the atmosphere. It doesn't help with the setting. It doesn't help with the plot. It doesn't help with anything. And like someone who occasionally DMs and plays, you sit there and almost you get itchy, and you try not to interject. And I don't want to say rules lawyer, but almost like settings lawyer or like lore lawyer, but you want to, because you sit there and you get mad. Like you sit there and you become frothy at the mouth, because you're like, it's like using there's those people that get really mad when people use a butter knife to undo a screw, right? And for me, I'm one of those people. When you don't use a monster properly, or you mess up the lore, it angers me. Like, and I see, and people are like, well, that's you being a purist, and like, no doubt in my mind that I am. When it comes to things, though, when people want to take something and pilot them slightly improperly and give players, especially new ones, like that feel of victory, and they're like, oh, okay, this was hard. And you know what? It's okay to pull as a DM. Sometimes it's okay to pull a punch on occasion, so the players might have a chance or win because they want that feeling of the win. And you know what? You could obliterate them, no problem. But it doesn't necessarily make for a good story. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not what you do as a DM. Sometimes it's the dice that tell the story. So there's a lot of variables inside. But it's the idea where if you're going to play something that is known as like the Terror of the Void or some crap, you want to make it so. Because otherwise, I sit there and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is not what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
My own opinion on it is pretty jaded by my own particular tastes.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, that seems like a personal thing, because you know, some people love to just, you know, kick in the door, and other people like those, you know, really heavy atmosphere. But at the end of the day, no matter what system you're playing, it's supposed to be a vehicle for entertainment. Or rather, I should say that the idea of story and events are vehicles for entertainment, and that includes monsters and battles. So as far as like using a butter knife as a screwdriver, if people are trying to get a particular feeling for the players, or they're trying to, you know, build that particular entertainment, whether it's horror or hilarity even, you know, nothing like, you know, 6 goblins accidentally get lit on fire by a dumped lamp, you know, no, that's funny, right?
Yeah.
But it's more like trying to use a screwdriver as a butter knife. If people are using their monsters improperly, that's why I don't think it's really, you could say that it was using them correctly if they totally smash the players. I mean, sometimes the dice are on their side. You'll wind up with players going ahead, and you'll be like, I'm going to throw this big freaking, you know, storm giant at you, and they're like, oh, sweet, I just got 2 crits, and roll on the table, broke its legs, and then, oh, he's prone. Boop, 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 boop. Done. Wow, that was an epic battle, guys. And sometimes that's okay. You know, if you're gonna err on the side of caution, that's good. As far as total party kill, I think that can be useful too, because again, part of the entertainment is feeling invested in your character and having a sense of verisimilitude. If you can't die, and I mean, it'd be like, could you imagine watching a TV show and, you know, you're like, oh, I love this. It's, you know, season 6, and you know, the Dragon Queen just realizes that she's got full plate plot armor. All of a sudden, you know, even for players, that takes a lot of the enjoyment out of it. It takes away the risk, it takes away the frightening effect, it becomes a numbers game. I'm going to grind for XP, or I'm going to, you know, go do something I want. And that's fine too. But in the end, I think it really matters, not so much on whether or not the rules themselves are correct, but that the story can fit with it. Because if you've got, like, for example, if you want to give your players an easy time, they want to fight something big and they fight something scary, but they're too level for it, but it's nice little like preview or a different thing, go ahead. Just find a way to give that creature a disadvantage. If it's, you know what, if it's a mind flayer, what if this one is sick? What if they find a sick one stranded in a cave? Alright, it's going to be easier, and that can reflect that. But if there's no chance of loss, I think it actually takes away from the game. The other thing is, I remember quite vividly some of the times my own characters have died, or we've been total party killed, and they're memorable. And sometimes that's funny too. And it's just, it seems to me like, yes, if you do pick a system, you should be familiar with the rules as much as can be. But as you pointed out, I forgot the code name we're using.
Just use my name. I already said it.
All right, Doxed Bryant.
There you go.
It's Mekhalikhar.
Mekhalikhar. I really find that, how best to put that? I think the best way to put it would be that if there is going to be conflict with players over the rules, you've all agreed on using a rules system as a mediator between your story and your entertainment. You want to say this is a way for us to randomly generate outcomes. You're either using dice or rules or something, but it's something that makes it a little bit neutral between the storyteller and the players. So I think, yes, it should be treated as fair, even ground. It is supposed to be a bridge between those two. But also, at the end of the day, it's about carrying entertainment to people. And if people aren't going to be entertained by the rules, then change the rules. They're written on paper. They're not etched in stone tablets.
Okay. So, from what I'm hearing, is you're saying that yes, the rules are important. Use them. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to muck about with, say, a monster and use it incorrectly, give a reason. Assuming that you are consciously using it incorrectly, and you're not just like, dragons are cool, let's put him in a cave at the bottom of a dungeon where he can't fly and he won't use his breath weapon because it'll burn him or something.
There better be a good reason.
Like, he'll be surrounded by gold, so he's basically stuck in place. Like, you've basically grappled the dragon permanently. He can't defend himself, and he's real stupid. So if you just try to poison him, he'll just eat it and die. Like assuming your GM is conscious of these things, that I think that idea works. But if your GM isn't conscious of these things, then maybe in that situation, he's picked the wrong system, or maybe he needs to learn what that system is. But that I don't know. That seems to be a...
Well, it might be a little bit rude to say, but frankly, if you're not at least comfortable with the system, don't run a game.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I'm thinking about it. Like, bad GMing is almost the same kind of argument as if you have the right group. It's like if you have a bad GM, like, yeah, of course everything's going to be shit.
Yeah.
Crap.
Yeah.
But if you have the right group, everything's going to be good. So I guess we'll add bad GM, like a completely negligent GM. Like, we're talking just like, you only know one system, but you actually don't know that system. Someone who breaks every rule because they're just terrible.
Well, just get rid
if
of
you have a bad GM, he's a bad GM. We're trying to have good GMs. We're trying to talk about normal and bordering on excellent GMs that are just neglecting things, Okay. So, or have options. So I guess this rule implies that you know multiple systems, or that you are aware of multiple systems, and you are choosing one. Because if all you know is Dungeons and Dragons, and this is your first rodeo, and you haven't read all the books, then this rule can't really apply to you, because you don't have a choice. You only have one. Choose wisely, one choice, or don't run. And so you guys want to play, so I guess you're going to choose wisely the only choice you have. So.
Well, I tend to forget other systems fairly easily, except for the one I'm immediately using. Like, I don't remember anything about 4th edition.
Oh, God.
Aside from, like, I think it was, like, something goofy, like, you could tier up, like, say if everyone is level 5, you could have so many XP worth of monsters at level, like, 6 or maybe 4, and then, like, elites, for some god-awful reason, had a variable, but, like, it just... When you find something that works, and you find something that's enjoyable, and you find something that doesn't cause a nosebleed or an aneurysm, like, just stick with it. I don't...
No.
It's like, for me, D&D is about a good time, good atmosphere, and being able to put on a proper presentation and a proper show and throwing some numbers at it. And people essentially role playing, like, that's the point. What really upsets me in a play group is people that tend to just, they numbers game, like, everyone, like, optimization's good, but unless I'm playing a character that, say, suffered some debilitation and whatnot, it just, I don't like the idea of people being so hard set on certain things. Though, like I said, I was a purist. Like, I'm a purist on some matters, like monster lore and things that have been put in place. But when it comes to things that are like, when people worry about, like, when people worry about certain elements that they don't necessarily need to worry about all that much, like in the end, like people are going to get really mad when I say this, it's a game.
Yeah.
It's a game.
Yeah. Okay, I get that too. That it's a game, but that doesn't help.
No,
I know what you're saying. Like, but it doesn't help because what we're trying to do is get good at the game, right? Like, we're trying to learn how to be decent and how to avoid. I guess the best way would be how to avoid the hiccups that occur that when accumulated enough cause a game to take a real dump. You know, and so this is one of those rules for sure that if you encounter it enough, like let's just say you do everything else perfectly, but you encounter enough of these staggering points again and again, like, you know, every session, at least twice a session, the rules lawyer or multiple people start telling you that you did it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, your game is going to fall apart.
Well, and... Sorry.
To let me finish my thought, you know. I would even say, even if your game successfully concluded, it will be looked at not fondly because you used the rules so poorly that everybody won immediately. Mm-hmm. You know, or if they ever tell their friends who also play the game, like D&D stories, right? Who also play the game, those people who are playing with the rules correctly will look at these people and be like, you guys are ridiculous, you know? And I remember hearing stories like this where people would be like, yeah, my like 5 characters, we all got together and we killed a god by putting a bag full of glue on his head, and the god couldn't get the bag off, and we had fingers, like we got the crawling hands in the bag of holding, and the god's head was in there, and he was blind and deaf, and we totally just killed him. Just like, yeah, that story's real good, friend. That's a good story. I'm sure you had a riot. Like, you know, you think about that, and I don't know, and especially with younger kids, obviously, you're gonna see more of that. But
what do you think about homebrew modules and DMs who don't really kind of make up for the power curve? Because I've ran into certain situations, like especially when I was starting out, where I'm like, I like making things and I like being creative, so I make an artifact, and then that artifact basically completely ruins my game because I'm a doofus and I didn't realize what the hell I was doing. Yeah,
and that's once again, I think this would fall into the category of this rule. Like, let's assume you know Dungeons and Dragons exceptionally well,
yeah,
but you want to change something, so you're going to change the system just a little bit by, let's say, creating a homemade artifact, which I fully endorse. This is an amazing idea, you know, homebrew everything for all I care. I think that's the best.
Yeah.
But choose wisely what you introduce into your setting. Because once you've introduced it, once the cat is out, you know, you've got it. Once you've given them that MacGuffin, or this new ruling, or this extra prestige class that has all these cool powers, you know, cat's out of the bag now. Like, what have you done? You know, I guess you could just take it all away. But once you've changed the system, you end up with really goofy stuff.
It would actually be a good concept if you did almost not like a PowerPoint presentation, but if you did almost like a point form thing on what are the responsibilities of a player and what is the responsibilities of a GM.
I think that's what we're sort of going for at the end of this series. That I think I want to accumulate it into some sort of manifesto.
Yeah. Well, if you can put it out there like in a way where it's simplified and like rules are one thing and responsibilities, in my opinion, are another, because everyone has a role to play, right? And the idea of a DM creating atmosphere, creating setting, knowing his or her rules, and knowing how to think on their feet, knowing how to react, but also players where it's like, okay, pay attention is a big thing, and know your backstory, know your character, know what they would do. Don't necessarily deviate from it, because why would your lawful good paladin throw babies in the well?
Because it's funny.
Because it's
they
funny.
Were evil babies.
There you go. Right?
I detected evil, and I saw that these innocent babies were evil. Throw them in the well. Can't lose paladinhood there.
That's right. I blessed all the water.
Why'd the GM take away my powers? This is bullshit.
This is not good.
Save one baby to be your own Quasimodo.
There you go. I raise it to be my hireling because I wanted to lift my stuff. That's awesome.
No, but if I might, the very foundation of it at the end, what we're talking about are the mechanics. We're talking about math of it.
Yeah.
And that's like we've been bringing up D&D, and D&D, it is a percentile system, let's be honest, because that's all what a D20 is a truncated percentile. It's for it goes 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way.
Yeah, especially when you add your stats, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
and
a
that's-
probability.
And that's the thing, is it's going to give you an equal chance from 5% to 100% because it's 1 to 20, right? And if you're adding bonuses or increasing the difficulty, you're just shifting that percentage by that same amount. That's all there is to it. And so this actually, I find, does lend itself to a fair number of games, particularly action. I think that's why D&D is that pulp action fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it fits like if you were to compare it to a movie, you wouldn't play Bridge to Terabithia D&D 5th edition.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
But it does have things that it does lend itself to. Same thing. But what's Gurps? Gurps is D6s, right? I think you get.
I think
number
it's
of dice.
D8s.
You get like a number of dice.
Or
right?
D10s, might be. I don't remember GURPS. It's been like 20 years since I played GURPS, but it was just a universal system that I used as an example. But or I think it might be 2d6. You roll 2d6 and you try to get under your stat. Because I think 12's the highest.
Yeah, you were
Something tells
counting
me.
number of successes. In any case, when you're talking,
I don't think it's a number of successes game. I think it's a straight roll. I think it's a straight roll. I think it's skill plus stat and 2d6 or 3d6 or something. I don't know.
Oh, that's weird.
There's people I know that are like that are like big GURPS players or whatever, and they would know better than I do. Like I could pull a GURPS book out now, but I'm not going to.
Okay, I was gonna say if we were to choose wisely, we here right now would not pick Gurps.
No, that would like maybe we would, because we'd be like, no, this system is not D&D, but it does something else. So we're gonna pick GURPS. I'm gonna read up on GURPS and make sure I know what I'm talking about. But we'll pick GURPS because of that. But another thing that I'm going to add, because you mentioned that D&D at its fundament is a percentage game, but I think it's more than that. I think it's math. But I remember in 3rd edition, and I've mentioned this before to other people in conversation, that the average level of a D&D 3rd edition 3.5, and probably Pathfinder to be modern, I'll bet you Pathfinder has exactly got the same problems, because it probably uses the same challenge rating, various challenge rating rules, and the experience point game. The average hunter, like in a society, any village that goes out and hunts, and if these hunters hunt like elk or moose specifically, they hunt moose. So a northern hunter, guess what level he would be?
Well, let's see. He's getting what, like 25 XP each time, 10 XP, something like that.
A little bit more, but
depends on.
We'll tell you the number. It's 15.
That's dumb.
Level 15. That's the system that you choose. You've chosen that. And so your average hunter should be level 15. Now my question to you is, what do you think that the average orcish warlord who kills many hunters in his career of being an orcish warlord, what do you think his level would be?
Is he killing level 15 hunters?
Yes, because that's their average level.
I guess he's a god now.
Yeah, I guess he's more than epic level. So when you start off at level 1 in the 3.5, 3.0 D&D world, what are you?
A loser?
You're children. You are literally 10 years old, and you are just picking up your first wooden sword because you can finally lift the damn thing. All right? The guards who train with the people who hunt with bows, those guys are all going to be between 15 and 20. Like, every single person who is a full-grown adult in that setting, the way that system is implying it, nobody plays that way. Because nobody's read into it. But nobody plays that way because it'd be ridiculous. You're all level 1, enjoy the fruits of death, because you told the guard that he's a poopy head because you're a PC, and he looked at you and you exploded, right? Every single guy at the library is a freaking Mystic Theurge with perfect stats, and it's stupid. It lends itself to ridiculousness.
You're gonna get Jeremy the sociopath. Why does he start at level 2? He's been killing cats.
Yeah. But that's the thing. How many cats have you killed in your childhood? Yours should be level 2. They give you experience points right up to level 5.
So are we saying misunderstood sociopathic youth probably at a higher level in invert?
Well, yeah. Well, D&D's level is basically combat stats, right, for the most part. So yeah, they would be. But anyway, the system was put together, and it implies a setting, and that's the setting that it's implying.
Well,
nobody runs in that setting because nobody reads that far into it. But that is what it's implying. So, you know, if you had a GM who was just like, okay, I understand this. All right, you guys walk into a tavern, and the tavern keeper says he's a former soldier. It's like, well, I got in a bar fight with the tavern. He breaks your leg with his fingers. You're like, what? How is this guy so strong? It's like, it's in the rules, bro. Is that a bad GM? Who's following the precedent set by this thing?
Are people having fun?
Well, you don't know yet because the game's just started. They're all jumped into the tavern because they're not following the first rule.
Guards having fun.
The guard's having fun, and the GM's all like, hey kids, let me show you what D&D's all about. It's all about you losing until you get high enough. Or the game would start. It's like, we all want to play soldiers. It's like, okay, well, you're rookie soldiers. You're all level 12. Like, there would be no level 1. Because level 1, who would want to play it? You'd be children. Like, mommy, I need to eat my supper. Like, this is what you're playing. And then, you know, trouble happens and you go and fight goblins, I guess? Because these goblins are crap, so they're children too. You know, like, there would be such small tier threats. Like, and that's the other thing, is like, with this implied, the way that their EXP system works, it implies these things. So you have to look back on the monsters and see how ridiculous they are.
Hey, that's only if everyone's a PC. It's not like monsters level up. I mean, cool.
Yeah, I guess if everyone's a PC, that, like, yeah, but then that implies something else. Like, now you're implying there's a spark now. Like, these are exalted. Like, these are exceptional people who can gain experience points from things. And so everybody else is just like, but then how does the hunter defeat the moose?
Oh, yeah, how about NPCs then?
Like, one shot, one kill isn't real anymore. Because the moose is all like, I got 38 hit points. Roll your D8, hunter. I'm attacking. Like, you can never kill a moose.
The librarian with a cannon, he's still alive.
That's the thing when it comes to these systems. It's trying your best to apply a number to actual things.
Yeah.
And whereas we see it as like, you mentioned hunting and putting it even in a thing where you have a gun, right? Like, I try to remember I don't know offhand. I don't know the stats of an elk in 5e, but I know that there's I know that Wizards published a little thing on shotguns and rifles for 5e, right? So it's there. It's been calculated, but I would actually be interested to see if you can make a ranger give him a shotgun and see how well. And
see if he can actually, like, at level 1, kill an elk.
One shot. Yeah, one shot. Yeah, you'd have to crit. And then meanwhile, like, you have avid hunters who regularly one-shot large game.
Yeah,
toddlers one-shot adults.
We're talking about, like, punching them in the scrotes?
No, I was actually talking about that woman who left an unloaded gun in her back seat and her baby grabbed it in its car seat and shot her in the back.
But there you go. Like, that's another example of where the system is implying the setting, right?
Yes.
Like, obviously the setting of the real world.
D&D
like,
would be terrible
let's get
with
meta.
guns.
Setting of the real world is a lot harsher. The damage dice are a lot higher than they are in the D&D
They're
world.
like D percentiles, because, like, maybe you'll be fine. Maybe you'll instantly die. Maybe you could get shot 38 times and still walk out of that bank.
Maybe we should digress from guns, because we're turning into a political commentary channel at this point.
Okay.
It's true. Well, I think D&D is actually one of the reasons why I personally have never liked guns in D&D, is because at the end of the day, yes, the system says guns are either the most dangerous thing ever, or that farm boy, because he's level 3, you can shoot him in the face with a shotgun and he'd be fine. You know, so it just doesn't work very well, and so that's where things like
I think it's like
Dark Heresy works a lot better for that, because it makes guns dangerous because, you know, your hit points are limited, right?
Yeah. D&D has its flaws. Like, I don't want to just shit on D&D, crap on D&D. And it has its flaws. It's the most popular, though, and everybody kind of knows what it is. Mm-hmm. But these are things that I'm talking about. Like all the systems have these implications that are sort of deeper in the system. Mm-hmm. And what I was saying originally too, where it's like the rules lawyer might bring this stuff up. He might start talking about this, where it's like, why are we playing at level 1? You know, I go hunt. Like, the rules lawyer notices this. You're all level 1. It's like, let's go hunting for game. For 3 years. Stories are happening. We go to another town and hunt for game for 3 years. Can we fast track and be level 15 now? And then the GM goes, question mark. Like you just sit there, mouth agape, going, the system has just implied that all my starting characters should be level 15. Or the GM goes, or the players go, I'm 35 years old, right? Yeah. I've lived a fulfilling life and we're going on this adventure. Yeah. Okay. I'm a ranger, so I've hunted game before, right? And like you can see where this is going, right? It's like,
yeah,
I've hunted moose. This is what my level should be. And it's like, okay, you're level 15. What about everybody else? It's like, I'm a wizard. You know, I've countered spells. I've fought demons. I've summoned demons to fight them.
In that case, I would definitely say that players should pick their characters and their ages in regards to the actual beginning of their adventure. If they're going to start level 1 and they're 35, yes, it means you were some jackass who just, oh, pardon my language, some jerk who just sat there working as a cashier or something, doing absolutely fuck all for, until he's 35 and decides to be a murderer.
You can see what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
The system has implied your setting, and now as a GM, you've set up a scenario where the PC might reject your entire premise.
Hey,
based on the setting.
It's D&D. I'm rich enough. My family doesn't die. Because resurrection, you can get that cheap.
Yeah, well, for sure. Like, if you're a rich merchant family...
Yeah, but it's what? 1,000 gold to get a scroll of that thing? So what? So what? So
what's 1,000 gold?
What if you're a peasant? You got to sell your house. That's it?
Yeah.
How many people would do that?
Yeah.
Well,
sorry. Well, I was thinking about it too. I think it was Dagwood who sent me something online that was... it was, I don't know if they were physicists or what, but they were like just a bunch of academics who in a party made it the worst game humanly possible for this experienced DM because of things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was this DM. He was an engineer, but he had a physicist, a doctor, a lawyer, and somebody else on his. It was 2 physicists, doctor and lawyer, on his as players, and they were giving him a hard time by finding these clever solutions to everything he could throw at them, and it wasn't about the numbers at that point.
Well, and the thing is, in a situation like that too, I'd actually ask as a DM, I'd be like, "Are you playing your character? Are you waving your doctorate in the air?" And you know what I mean? Like, and it's such a.
Hey, if you got into 10, you should.
Well, if I'm playing a goblin, I'm not playing a goblin doctor.
Maybe you are.
Maybe I am. Okay, goblin doctors are
Sounds
sweet.
Fantastic.
But like,
that's like using the collision rules, like the dirt jump trick, right? Where you use the collision rules to get extra damage for your dice, and then cast Featherfall at the last second, so that they take the collision damage and you don't.
You kind of just let out your secret of the trade, though.
Oh, whatever. I don't care. It's an old trashy D&D rule that was too funny to like. You use a spear so you have reach.
Yeah.
Before you hit the ground, they get hit with the spear.
Just a little too far, buddy.
Yeah.
And then you featherfall.
Then you featherfall it as a quickened action because it's automatically quickened, and whoop, you hit the ground with no damage, but they take the full collision damage. Good times.
That's so cheesy.
I love it. It's called dirt jump.
Yeah.
Because it kicks dirt up. Also, it was on Castle Crashers. The guy jumps.
That's true. It always reminds me of Final Fantasy IV with Kain.
Yeah, the Dragoon trick.
Love that though.
That was a really good game.
Yeah. I wonder if because Final Fantasy was based on D&D. I wonder if it was based on that. If they were like, "Can I just do this?" And they're like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then they're just like, "No, we'll translate that. That's amazing." Yeah. I wonder if Dragoon is based on that exploit. Interesting.
Maybe
that would look. You'd have to look into it.
Well, there's always exploits. Like I remember back when we'd play like 2nd edition, and it would be like, okay, Tomb of Horrors, right? And people were like, okay, we're gonna die. What are we gonna do? Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go buy 30 cows. Because you know what's the best way to find a trap? Just start herding the cows through there.
Yeah.
They'll find them.
Use Move Earth or whatever to divert a river and flood the dungeon.
Yeah.
Then GM goes, "This is bullshit."
Yeah,
all sorts of goofy shit. But once again though, the system you chose implied that they can do this. Like, this is all things that they can do. And if you feel that your game has been disrupted because you chose a poor setting, a poor system,
Yeah.
that's on you.
Well, you end up in situations too where, like, I never get mad when my players think of things like that, because I sit there and I'm like, I've spent quite some time preparing for things, whatever. If you can solve it that easily, good on you. That's brilliant. Like, yeah, there's a magic door. What's the walls made out of? Wood. Cool. I use my axe. Like, oh, okay, awesome. Like, that was good for you for asking. Like, that is a thing that I always find there's like a bit of psychology to Dungeons and Dragons where you can not so much manipulate your GM, but you can find the flaws in logic. You can find these things that you can press on and come out on top. And that's to me is a sign of a good player. Like, it's happened to me, and I'm all like, that's awesome. Like,
so you're saying that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and that means this, right? Yes. And so I can do this, right? Yes!
Plus, that's why, like, paraphrasing can be a DM's worst enemy, right? So they're like, oh, I did say that. And like you had mentioned to me before, whatever you throw in your setting or in your plot can certainly be used against you, right? And mention going back full circle to that artifact that's based off a homebrew module. Same thing, right? If the player loses it, what's to say the goblin can't pick it up and use it against you? Like, it's literally a game of, if you find it on the ground and you make good use of it, good on you. It doesn't matter if you're a PC or an NPC.
That's actually one of my favorite ways to deal with, because sometimes you make a mistake as a DM and you let someone's like, hey, check out this prestige class or this feat or this item, and maybe they even just found a bizarre combination where they did something completely stupid but brilliant and whatever. But the point is that it's actually becoming disruptive to the game. And yes, you can talk to them out of game about it, but that's not ideal.
Yeah.
You could find a way to work through it in the game, which is good, but sometimes it's already, let's say, gone on too long. It's too late to turn around and be like, can you change your class or something like that? And that's where you can actually say, okay, fine. But you're not the only one in the world who does this.
Exactly.
You're not the only paladin there who has this particular feat combination. You're not the only frenzied berserker with pounce and
That's one of the rules.
Is it?
Yeah, it's one of the rules.
Well, that's not
with the. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting when you have that thing, because when a player discovers a clever trick, that is a grab bag for everyone, including the GM. And that's why I really like to reward good thinking and sending a bunch of cows through a dungeon, taking an axe to the wooden wall when you have a magic door, when you have a friggin' flesh golem and you use witch bolt on it, and you're like, okay, cool. So now I'm the medic from Team Fortress, and the golem's the heavy, right? Having those things it's fun. I think
it's part of the charm, actually.
It is part of the charm, and people like, and as Brian, I can use that now because you got doxxed. The thing that Bryant had mentioned was the idea that I actually lost my train of thought, so I'm going to completely digress.
Okay, well let's talk. Let's take a final point here.
Okay.
So let's see solutions.
Yes.
Because we mentioned the problem of you only know one system. So what's the solution? Learn 100 systems? That's stupid. I don't want to learn 100 systems. They're all trash. There's only one good system, but I'm not going to mention it.
You already plugged it.
Either way. Anyway, I don't want to learn all the systems. But there is a solution. So I'm going to say what I think the solution is, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
So a lot of things in universal systems, you'll read that these universal systems try to encompass a lot of things. Okay? And I would dare say that in D&D and in other setting-specific systems, they also try to encompass all the things that their system can do. So the answer, the way to choose wisely with when you only know one system is cut. Take your big shears and cut pages out of the book, basically. Not for real, because that's gross, and those are like $80 books, and as much as I disrespect them, you shouldn't disrespect them.
PDFs allow you to delete pages.
Perfect. Get the PDF.
Nailed
Do not pirate Dungeons and Wizards of the Coast material. That would be wrong.
Scan it yourself.
Scan it yourself.
And keep it for yourself. Don't do anything.
You
Anyway.
are allowed to make digital records of your
Cutting
own.
cutting
true.
rules out of the book. Say your setting doesn't want wizardry above level 5. Cut them out. Get rid of them. Say your setting doesn't want this. Cut it out. Take a look at the system. Write a list of things that aren't in the system when you start the game. And you say there. You go, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm playing core book. Spells up to level 4. Anything after that, you say what happens. Like that, you could just add a little like whatever so that wizards can become powerful, more powerful later on. But like, I don't want duo dimension and time stop in my freaking game because it's stupid. All right? But I don't mind the idea of limited teleports or something like that, right? You know, I don't want magic items of artifact level or magic items at all. Maybe you know, just cut it, snip, and once you've chosen wisely to cut the things that don't belong in your story, and the players obviously pick up on it, yada yada yada. Previous rules. Your game won't have these issues. And say in the example with the experience points table thing. What everybody does, I think, implicitly, without even knowing it, is they cut that rule out. They cut that experience table out and they say, this is not the way the world is governed. This is just... Because we didn't even know that this is what that implies.
Yeah.
But we're just going to cut that out. And the game, D&D works because people implicitly cut out the things they don't understand. Cut it out. Yeah. But then also, honor the things that you are using. Because everything you cut, and this is, I think I mentioned this in that other system. Once you cut, things that you cut enrich the things that remain. So if you don't have priests who cast priest spells, your wizards are all that much more valuable. If you don't have, like, you know, barbarians and warriors and rangers, it's like suddenly that guy with that fighter class, like that's the only game in town. You know, suddenly he's very useful. Like the fighter becomes so much more valuable. Or there's really nothing bad about cutting. You know, unless you cut to the point where it's not the setting you want.
I can agree to that. Like though I personally do, I guess I could say like minimalist cutting. There's certain things where I'm just like, you know what? One of the things I want to do is I want to eliminate this because I find it to be overused is one thing. What I like to do is prior to the game starting, I would like to set up a kind of like a booklet of common knowledge, and with that in mind, I'll put a rules for setting and a rules that I'm using and a rules that I'm negating and a rules that maybe I've changed for the benefit of the system or anything else. And, like, I don't use experience in my games. I use milestones because I find that when people don't, say, show up because, like, home lives happen, people get busy, or people find ways of manipulating things, they create an experience engine, which I've played in... I ended up that in 4th, where someone created an experience engine, and I'm like, okay, well, God bless you, you're level 20, what do you wish to do? What do you wish to do? Float into the clouds, have a good time.
Any wizard with summoning, I summon a creature, and I ask him to fight me to the death. Fight me and don't listen to me telling you to stop. And we fight. And then I get the experience points for defeating a challenge of that level.
South Park, fight a bunch of boars. Fight a bunch of boars up until you get to your thing, right?
That's right.
And that happens, especially in 4E where it was World of Warcraft, the tabletop.
Yeah.
And it was you have those things. That's why I think that milestones should be used more than experience, but that is just my personal opinion.
Yeah, everybody and milestones are like, you've all done a good thing, gain a level.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like y'all successfully defeated this story arc, gain a level, or you've all suffered greatly at the hands of this story arc, gain a level.
Exactly. And those are things that I enjoy. So I do, I guess in summary, agree with cutting. I would say that it depends obviously on what you cut, because I'm a fan of certain things, a fan of not of things. Like if you cut monster lore, I'll be rather pissed. So.
Yeah, I would just to add to that quickly is like when I'm saying cutting, I mean the global sort of settings of the system.
Yeah, okay.
Not like obviously, if you're going to be using say a mind flare because that's what we talked about. You know, if you're just like, yeah, I'm going to use a mind flare, but I'm going to cut all the things that make it a mind flare, and then they're just going to fight a guy with a squid face that does nothing. He just wiggles his arms around.
Octodad.
Yeah, Octodad. Yeah, you're fighting Octodad.
Nice.
Then sure, like I guess you can call it a mind flare, but it isn't. It's something else. It's an Octodad. You're fighting Octodad.
What if Octodad is a mind flare?
Then this is a very different game.
I actually agree, but I got to say that, yeah, because what you're talking about is a rules mechanic. To say, except for instead of saying experience points per creature killed or something like that, you're saying that, listen, just like in a television series, your abilities grow as the story develops.
And you see the character develop that way too as well.
And then you can also match up even events to that. You know, it's like, oh, geez, you finally found the great library of Magicka that you wanted your wizard to go. Boom. Sure enough, you gain a few levels of wizard as time passes, and so on, right?
Yeah.
It can provide good experience for this stuff. As far as cutting goes, I mean, obviously, you know, people talk about homebrew, adding things like if you're trying to do it like a naval campaign in D&D, you're going to want to have things a little bit more detailed than just I roll a sail check.
Yeah,
to ship stuff.
The vehicles need stats, and well, the thing is that
you need ropes, you need
exactly.
the tools, you need the other hazards, and so on. And
yeah.
You want to be able to put that kind of detail in there because there will be weird things. Let's say you are doing the kind of setting where someone says, "Well, what can I use my broadsword as a crowbar?" Yeah. And what do you do about that? So there are times where you will want to add things. But as for cutting things, I think that's actually exactly how you would produce a setting. Because if you look at any good setting, take Dark Sun. Dark Sun is D&D. It just took out most of it. Oh, you want to be a wizard? Nope. Gods? Nope. Halflings? Nope. Got rid of them. And there's reasons for it in the story and narrative that really flesh it out. But sometimes it's what's missing that really draws together the other effects. Because if you have a world where, you know, in your setting there is no resurrection magic, or there is no magic above level 4, right? I mean, spells can still be cast at higher level, but you're saying, what do the great masters spend their time on? You get very different effects for things. And I think that's actually when people design their setting, because when people look at like D&D, we're saying, well, what world does it imply? It implies a whole lot of worlds. The basic mechanics that are fundamentally underlying it, I mean, are what, a D20 and a couple of other stuff, hit points, you know, things like that. But it's meant to cover as many possible options as possible, right? And so it's when people actually cut out those rules and get rid of the chaff where they're saying they're actually making the world your own through exceptions, rather than just merely saying this is the world of D&D, because it's really just a rule book where they filled in a whole bunch of gaps so it's ready to play many different settings. That's really what it's for. And those universal systems are just an attempt to extend that between not just you could play any fantasy game you want to play just about anything. I would argue whether or not that means they do any of them particularly well, but it's just an extension of the same thing. And so a better understanding of the fundamental basic rules, I think, really gives people the flexibility to make it their own. But if you really want to flesh out a world or an adventure, I agree with you. Cut.
All right. So then I guess just to summarize then, it's, you know, when you're about to play a game, get ready. Because, like, get ready to cut the things that are erroneous to your system. And when you're adding, be wary.
Might I say, I would say one thing, which is if you are going to cut something, you better have a reason for it. If there's no paladins in your world and someone wants to be a paladin, they're going to ask why.
Yeah. So, yeah, when you cut, give reasons and make them count. Use them to enrich your setting. Mm-hmm. And when you're going to add things, be careful. Because when you add things, remember, system implies setting, and you need to choose wisely. And I thank you guys all for listening. Like I said, this was Bryant, aka Mekhalikhar, Swampy, Mr. Dagwood, hanging out here. It got off the rails a bit, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Next week, our topic will be, let me just fetch my paper out here. Rule number 4, your characters are not cooler than theirs. Stop showing them off. And until that time, everybody take care and have a good night.